So today my goal is to go over sectioning. Sectioning is just another projection that you will see on a drawing. And the purpose of it is to provide clarity, especially for objects that have complicated internal features. So for example, if you look at this projection, it's kind of confusing with all the hidden lines. So instead of doing that, what you do is you do a section view, which kind of cuts the object in half, like what you see here. You cut it in half so you can see what's inside instead of using the hidden lines. And as you can see here, this is a lot easier to read than this. Okay, so here's another example. As you can see, this is a really nice section view. I can see how the bolts come together. I can see the different parts. This is a very clean way to show that from this gear. Or in this example with the engine. Or in this turning lathe chuck assembly. As you can see, it's really nice that with the section view, I can communicate something as complicated as this on paper. Because think about it, as an engineer, you have to document this assembly. How do you even start? Think of how complicated this object is. How do you communicate this object and all the pieces that need to connect and all the dimensions and finishes and things like that? How do you communicate all of those details on paper? And a lot of times you have to rely on a section view to do that. So to create a section view, you first got to understand the cutting plane. The cutting plane is where you cut the object in half to show the inside. So for example, if I want to cut this object in half, I have to define the location of this cutting plane so I can see what's inside. So this is how you display a cutting plane line. The cutting plane is represented with this cutting plane line, which looks like a phantom line. It's got two dashes followed by an extension line. And this cutting plane line has arrowheads. The arrows tell you what you want to keep. So you throw this away, and then you say, I want to keep that. And then show me this after it's cut. You can switch the direction of those arrows. It's just what I said is going to be vice versa. Okay? The other kind of line that you need is the section line, which is what you see here. A bunch of parallel lines that show where the material is cut. And these section lines can be displayed different ways. If you have steel or concrete, you're going to show it in these different patterns. This is more relevant for the architecture industry. Most of the time in mechanical drawings, you can display all your section lines like this, and 99% of the time, the machinist is going to know what you're talking about. Whenever you do a section view, you got to add labels. So on the cutting plane line, you got to put A, B, B, whatever, but it's got to correlate to the projection here. So it's going to say section AA if this correlates to this cutting plane line. And then if you have another section view, maybe in this direction, it's going to be BB. The angle matters. When you create a section line, make sure it's not parallel to the solid line and not perpendicular. Okay? It should be somewhere in between. The reason for that is for clarity. If you don't have a good enough scale, if this looks really spread out, it's very easy to confuse your section line for a visible line, and then you'll get problems. The machinist is going to get confused. So instead, make it look very clear. Make it very distinct from the visible lines and the hidden lines and things like that. So the purpose of section views is really to avoid putting hidden lines. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to do a section view, don't include the hidden lines on that view because it's defeating the purpose of the section view. Okay, so just keep it clean. Just keep it like this if you're going to do a section view. So there are different kinds of section views. The first kind is the full section, which cuts the object in half completely from start to finish, just like you see here. As opposed to a half section where you just cut a quarter of it. So you see what's going on here? This is showing you the part as you would from the projection, but then we're showing you a quarter of the piece from this cutting plane line. You also have a revolved section, which is pretty much superimposing the section view on top of the front view. And then you have some sort of break on each end to show that it continues. This is mainly used in catalogs for bar stock. It's not really used on detailed drawings for custom machinery or fixtures or things like that. But in catalogs, sometimes they use the revolved section. Another common type of sectioning is the offset section. So I was very honest to say what is not popular and what is popular. This one is very popular. A lot of times you have a bunch of holes that are not aligned on the same axes. So what you do is you create an offset section where you break the cutting plane line so it hits the hole right at the center. The reason for that is because then you get full half pipes. You get perfect half pipes on your section view, as opposed to just cutting it all the way through where you get, a quarter pipe here and then a little bit of the tip there, and it's just not clean. It's bad. It's unprofessional. So with an offset section, you get a really nice clean cut, and it's just so much easier to read on a drawing. Another very common type of section is the breakout section. Okay? Sometimes you have a really complicated machine or fixture where you don't want to do a full section or a breakout section. So to avoid that, what you do is a breakout section where you just kind of chisel out just a little piece of the machine so you can just show the insides of that. And probably the best example I can think of with this is the Star Wars Incredible cross section. So if you Google search Star Wars Incredible cross sections, for example, in this machine, as you can see, there's a bunch of breakout sections. You see it's showing me part of the engine here, part of the cockpit here, okay, part of the engine. All right, so this is a really good way to take advantage of the breakout section. This really helps me see what's going on inside and how it interconnects with the outside, and it's just a really clean way. The next kind of section is the conventional break. A lot of times you have something long like this where there's not a lot of things going on in the center. There's a lot of things going on the left and the right, but nothing in the middle. When you have something like that, don't just import that on your drawing. Use a conventional break. You don't want to waste all that space for nothing. So when you do a conventional break, it will sandwich, it will compress this piece and take much less space. And when you add a dimension, the number is still going to be this distance, but it's going to have a little zigzag symbol to say, hey, this is a broken dimension, meaning it's actually longer than what it looks. It's just condensed just to save space. So do take advantage of this. I've used this a number of times on my drawings, and it's a very, very effective way of utilizing your real estate space as best as possible. And these are the different symbols for it to show the break. The zigzag is what shows up in SolidWorks by default, but you can use these other symbols too if you like. When you do a section view on an assembly, make sure that you change the angle of your section lines. Make sure that they are different on each piece so you can easily differentiate one part from another. And as you saw in the earlier examples, we're seeing that all over the place. See how the angles are different? See how the angles are different? So this is very standard protocol. You can also do an isometric of a section view. So we already learned about isometrics in pictorials, and now we're learning about section views. So what I'm saying is you can do an isometric of a section view. So sometimes that might add a little bit more clarity on your drawing. So remember, when you're working in industry, you have this complicated model, this object. You have to communicate it on paper. I'm just showing you that here's another way you can display your object to easily understand what's going on, okay? So I encourage you to take advantage of this. And then finally, this last slide is talking about dimensioning. It's saying that another benefit of the section view is that you can dimension is that you don't have to dimension hidden lines, because when we will learn about dimensioning in the next lecture, we will learn that it's not good to dimension a hidden line. So to do that, you can create a section view and dimension a visible line instead. So what I'm going to do now is do 3 examples of sectioning. So this is just the start file on the Google Drive. And later we will learn how to generate these section views automatically by pressing a button. But I want to practice how to create these sections from scratch. Okay, so first thing you might want to do is go to File Properties, fill out the template to get this all set up, and now we're ready to go. So we're given some views and we are asked to draw the section view. So I'm going to go ahead and start. So what I'm going to do is turn on my layer. It's right here. It's already turned on and it's right here. And then I'm going to use my line set with solid. And remember, don't use this. It sometimes doesn't work really well. So I'm just going to use that. Alright, so I'm looking at this object and I can tell that first of all there's going to be a box. Okay, a box that's going to define this structure. So as you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm cutting this object at this location, I'm throwing this away, and I'm keeping that. How do I know that? Because of the arrows. So now I'm going to draw the rest of this. So if I'm cutting it there, this edge is going to show up. So it's going to go all the way through. How do I know that? Because of this hidden line. You see how it's going all the way through? That's how I know it goes all the way down. Okay, as far as this is concerned, I don't know if this is an incline or a recess. I don't know that. But when I look in the side view, you see how it's kind of has a hard stop in here? This tells me that it's indeed a recess. Let's see. So we have some sort of structure here. We don't know if it's a counterbore or a countersunk. But again, if we look at the hidden lines here, if we look at the clues, we can see it's a countersunk. So what I'm going to do is connect the dots and draw this flathead. So the visible lines look good, but now we got to add the section lines. To add the section lines, I encourage you to use something a little thinner. I created a layer called Centerline Single. It's just a thinner line. And to create the section lines, we're just going to use the area hatch and fill. Okay, again, this is not the way this program is meant to be used. I'm just trying to build what we're trying to build without having to use the drafting board. Okay, so if you click on a section, as you can see, it will show me the section views. But I don't really like the scale. Let me bring it up a bit. Okay, 0.25 looks pretty good. So if I were to cut this in half over here, this is going to show, that's going to show. So I'm just going to add the section lines right there. And then I also need a center line here, so I'm going to switch my layer to center line. And I'm just going to guide my line to that so it looks okay. And really all I need now is just a labeling. So I can go to annotations and type in note. If you remember, you guys start with section. It's going to be A-A because this is also going to be A, and it's going to be A over here as well. Okay, AA, section AA. And that is how you complete the section view. Okay, moving on to the next one. In this example, I'm given an isometric, which is nice because this gives me a lot of clues. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this. The section view, and again I'm looking at the isometric, I'm looking at the views that I'm given, and I can see that this structure is going to give me some sort of shape that I see here. Alright, I believe that is not correct. This is going to go there, it's going to go here. See, this is a half pipe, as you can see here. It's a half pipe that goes up to there and completes like this. Okay, and then as you can see, we're cutting it through here, so this is gonna show, and this is gonna show. Alright, and then this is gonna show, and that's gonna show. So that looks pretty good, I like that, but now we gotta add center lines. So there's gonna be one for here to show this through hole, and one for there. So that looks pretty good. Now we're going to add some section lines. So if you remember, we're going to switch to centerline single and use the area hatch and fill. And we're just going to fill in the areas where the material will expose. So again, if we look at the arrows, this is what we're keeping, this is what we're throwing away. And then finally, I'm just going to add the label. So this one's going to be section A-A. And here is going to be A, and then another A. And again, when we learn how to use the tool, all right, there's a section button here that's going to automate all of this. But you got to understand why we do this, why we drew that, why we drew this and that. So this is why we're doing all of this by hand. The last example has a bit of a composite section view, meaning there's multiple section views on the same drawing. You will also notice that we have an offset section view here, where we're breaking the section view so that we can get the half pipe of both of these features. So we're going to go ahead and draw our solid lines. So it should be pretty self-explanatory. There's really not a lot of ways you can go wrong with this one. I just pressed Y to repeat last command. Alright, so there it is. So I'm just hitting escape and Y, or enter. I believe enter also repeats last command. Okay. And I'm just building on to this structure. So I'm gonna, alright, so there's the visible lines. Now let me add the section lines. So it's going to be area hatch and 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, because here's our cutting plane line, and we're showing the material that remains from that. So really, that's all there's to it. It's already labeled and everything. I'm just going to add center lines. So I'm going to add one here. And if you really want this to be centered, I mean, you can just dimension it. You know that this is, let's see, this is a third, so you just divide this by 2 and you can get it really centered. But we don't have to get this detailed for this. You need 2 center lines for the slot, okay? Anything that's round needs a center line. Same with this. This is called a longitudinal center line. This is called a center mark. They always need to correspond to each other. This needs to be aligned perfectly. Okay, let's work on the last one here. And we're going to draw the boundary box. So this is what we're keeping. This is what we're throwing away. So that means that this is going to show. So since we're cutting here, these half pipes are going to show. And this circle is also going to display. Okay. From here, I'm going to go ahead and do my section lines. And there's that. And I'm going to add my center lines. Oop, never mind. Center line. So I'm just going to do a center mark. I'm going to do a center mark here. And one there. Okay. And I'm going to add 2 center lines here. One here. And one here. Okay. So as you can see here, we have a section view to represent this offset section at a full pipe for each. And then we got a section BB where we're cutting it here. So again, like I said, when you have a complicated object, when you have complicated internal features, think of the benefits of a section view. Consider using a section view on your drawing because it will add a lot of clarity. You don't want to have something like this with a bunch of hidden lines. Think of the benefits of a section view and consider it on your drawing. So that concludes the lecture on section views.